I don't remember.
21st works just fine for me. Sorry for the delay. Okay.
Okay. What was in the subject line for your email to schools? Permitting to.
Can you, oh, here you go. Got it just now.
Can you do that?
Perfect. Thanks, Mina.
Can you do something about it on the internet, like how to?
Definitely. Okay.
Welcome to the regular meeting of the Albany Unified School District Board of Education for Tuesday, February 27th, 2018. May we have a roll call, please?
President Black,
Here.
Vice President Stapleton Gray,
Here.
Board Member Blanchard,
Here.
Board Member Clark,
Here.
Board Member Chutain,
Here.
Student Board Member Athaniak,
Here.
Student Board Member Silwal.
Here.
Okay, for those who wish to participate, we will now have the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. May we have a reading of the AUSD mission and vision statement?
The mission of the Albany Unified School District is to provide excellent public education that empowers all to achieve their fullest potential as productive citizens. AUSD is committed to creating comprehensive learning opportunities in a safe, supportive, and collaborative environment, addressing the individual needs of each student.
Thank you. The board took no action in closed session. Does anyone want any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, can we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Next, the consent calendar. Does anybody have any items on the consent calendar they want to comment on or pull from the consent calendar? Okay, I want to just mention that there have been some corrections to the minutes that I think the board has seen already, but they will be incorporated when we approve the consent.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so can we have a motion on the consent calendar?
Move we approve the consent calendar?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Board and superintendent report.
Thank you, President Black, trustees. I'm actually going to defer my time when Karen Neerheim does the Safe Schools report because they're going to be talking about our trip to the Museum of Tolerance, which I attended with about 40 teachers and administrators last week. So I will defer my time to them. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Yep.
Yeah, I think since the last meeting, Superintendent Williams and myself and a Albany High School student went to Sacramento to visit with our representative, Tony Thurmond, and the staff of our Senator Nancy Skinner to advocate for improved school funding. So it was a really wonderful morning. It was especially exciting to be able to be there with a student. Our meetings went well, and I'm happy to report that there are some things going on in the legislature to improve school funding that I hope we can really get behind here in Albany. I think that there is a bill coming out of the Assembly to raise the base rate of funding per student. And then there's also a Senate committee who has a proposal for the governor's budget that would use some of the money that has not yet been allocated to, and to designate that for education. So more details to come, but I certainly hope that we can become active as a community and let our representatives and senators know how greatly those funds are needed. Thanks.
Thanks.
Sorry. Do you mind if I add to that? So thank you for sharing that. Tomorrow I will actually be in Sacramento on behalf of all of our school districts in Alameda County, speaking before a joint committee for special education funding to increase for that. And so there are three, they're called spot bills that are going to be coming out, and I really, really encourage parents to write letters to their legislators for this. And so I will provide more information at the next board meeting. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? Ross?
Two items. One is sort of an ad for the library. For those who don't know, the library has added a kiosk for laptops a while ago, but also now participating with the other libraries in the Alameda County system will let or loan at no cost Wi-Fi hotspots, which was a pretty cool thing. My daughter took it with her delegation to the Youth and Government Conference up in Sacramento. So for 3 weeks, you can get on the internet for free. It was something I would have said the size of a cigarette pack, but we don't talk about cigarette packs much anymore. It's something about yay big. And I've wandered around San Francisco with it in my pocket, essentially being a Wi-Fi hotspot. Secondly, I think we should mention the Florida shootings in Parkland, and I'd really like to mention something that was passed along to me on this. If you want to look it up online, the issue of the Overton window, meaning the sort of window in which people consider things, and ideas like, well, we should arm all the teachers with the money we don't have to currently train teachers or equip teachers or hire teachers is a pretty, not just crazy, but it effectively tries to shift the debate away from the pretty much commonsensical, wow, we can do something about gun violence in a lot of normal ways. I think we're very lucky to have a very stable and safe community generally. I think most schools never go through the horror that this school in Florida did. I don't think we solve anybody's problems by putting more guns into schools, no matter who's holding them. So I think we ought to just sort of flat out reject a lot of what we hear and focus on what there is an awful lot of evidence for. And I really hope out of this comes, and I'd really laud the students who are pushing on this. I really hope we get things like the CDC studying gun violence, that the restrictions that were passed to block this are removed, because we really should be thriving on education and information rather than, by law, avoiding discussion or avoiding research.
Thanks, Ross. And just following on to that, we will be bringing a resolution to the board, I think at the next meeting in early March.
Yes, we'll bring a resolution to the board at the next meeting.
regarding gun violence for the board to consider. Anyone else? Good. Student board members report.
On Saturday, February 10th, Berkeley Chess School held an elementary K through 5 school championship. How does this relate to us, you may ask? 24 schools participated in the tournament, and our Marin School students did an amazing job, winning first place for the school.
The third annual Black History Month celebration was on Thursday, February 15th, in the Ocean View Multipurpose Room. It was a great day to celebrate, a great chance to celebrate Black history in Albany.
A huge congratulations to all of speech and debate for a stellar performance at last week's tournament. Special shout out to Ruby T, Maria F, Milo K, Nathan S, Samantha S, Yunfan C, Georgie K for breaking in their respective events.
Join us for Parent Education Night, Imagine a World Without Hate, an Anti-Defamation League event, which is hosted at Cornell Ocean View and Marin, hosted by Cornell Ocean View and Marin's PTAs on Wednesday, March 7th from 6:30 to 8 at Cornell. And this will be basically about how to disrupt bigotry, bullying, and hate crimes in our community, and how to help ourselves and our children become stronger allies.
Come to Family Math Night at Cornell on Friday, March 13th in the Cornell Multipurpose Room.
Now, this one I'm really excited for. Albany High School's Spring Social Event of the Year, hashtag Flashback Friday, will be on Friday, March 16th at Memorial Hall.
Tickets are now on sale for the Marin Moonlight Auction, which will be on Sunday, March 24th, 6 through 10. Some of the most sought-out after items at the Moonlight Auction are the community building experiences, like sign-up parties and the donations that come from our own school community. So please join us and consider donating.
And that concludes the school board report.
Do we have any questions for the students?
I'd like to comment that the Berkeley Chess School does an amazing job, particularly making chess accessible to girls and boys, and I think we're lucky to have them nearby.
Anything else? Okay, persons to address the board on matters not on the agenda. Is there anyone here who wants to address the board on matters that are not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none? Move on to our first staff report, which is promoting safe, supportive, and collaborative environments for all students and staff.
Thank you, President Black. I'm going to turn this over to our Director of Student Services, Carrie Neerheim, and I know she's brought some guests.
Good evening to all of you, and thank you to Superintendent Williams for deferring some time. I am excited to close the loop. When I first started here, I, with Melissa Poole, gave a presentation about an upcoming trip. One that was being done by staff from the high school, the second that was taking over 40 staff members from the elementary. Superintendent Williams also attended, and I wanted to report back to the board what happened and what we learned there and what we did while we were there. So, our Museum of Tolerance trip that was fully funded by a grant from the Museum of Tolerance, all of our travel and accommodations were fully funded by that grant. So it was a remarkable opportunity that level of professional development we might not have been able to do otherwise, and I felt it was incredibly valuable. So, on to the exciting presentation. We all got to the airport at 6 o'clock in the morning. And as we were trying to coordinate, we found out our flight was canceled. And huge kudos to our participants, unflappable as they were. We made it work, and we were able to get out on 2 different flights, and nobody was cross or angry and rolled with it. And so after our flights were canceled and we did get subsequent planes, we were happy. After a shuttle and a bus ride, we arrived at the museum. The museum has 2 buildings. On one side is the Museum of Tolerance. On the other side is office buildings and classrooms. And we spent time in both locations during our 2-day stay. And the staff at the museum were incredibly accommodating after our canceled flight, continued with us our first day and extended the time. Normally we would have been done at 5 and they had us stay till 6 so that we could get the full value of the presentation. We were very grateful for that. Some of the next slides are the interactive classrooms that we were able to participate in. For those of you that have traveled to the Museum of Tolerance, while our program did incorporate some more traditional seated classroom time, the real learning happened within the museum itself. They had interactive exhibits where we could control what we were seeing, what we were experiencing. And this was incredibly valuable because a lot of what we were learning about was difficult and emotionally challenging. We learned about events that happened during the Holocaust, during the civil rights movement, Japanese internment, the Cesar Chavez movement, and it's a very emotional and moving learning time. And so the fact that we were able to walk around and interact with the exhibits through technology, I think was very helpful in us being able to absorb what we were learning. But I will tell you that I have talked to a few of the colleagues that attended, and we're still trying to process. Even though we got back Thursday evening, we're still trying to process everything that we saw there. This is an example of some of the seat time that occurred over the 2 days. The presenter at the front is Sarah Witch, and she is an educator that started out of Minnesota and went to, she did some work with the Southern, say it again, Al?
Southern Poverty Law Center.
Thank you, the Southern Poverty Law Center. And then went on to work with the Museum of Tolerance and has done some really incredible work to create Common Core aligned standards in this area. This is Dr. Peter Mayer. He is a cardiologist and a university professor. He is also a Holocaust survivor that we were able to listen to. We had an audience with him for about an hour. He was amazing and told his story of what occurred for him and his family. And as a survivor, he became a cardiologist, as did 2 of his children, and also a professor at the university level. So by his survival, how many lives have been saved? This is Fan Shen Cox Di Giovanni. She has a one-woman show called One Drop of Love. She does a fascinating presentation on the history of the United States Census and how that was taken and how race was considered or not considered from the inception of the U.S. Census until now. She incorporated a whole host of questions about race, questions about gender, and how we could tackle those things. They were both exceptional. Sarah, this slide was very powerful to me, that they're not too young to start having these direct conversations, although we want to be sensitive about framing, but the importance of starting to have conversations about how we treat one another early on. One of the things that was provided to us were the tools for tolerance for professionals. Everything from the Tolerance Museum is free to educators. All you have to do is sign up on their website. For those of you that have seen the Teaching Tolerance magazine, that's free. All of the educational materials that they gave us are free, and we have access to everything on their website, completely free to us. So they have worked hard to design a curriculum aligned with our state standards, starting with the anti-bias domains of identity, diversity, justice, and action. And in alignment with these domains, they have the anchor standards. 5 anchor standards that are aligned to each one of the 4 domains. So and they go across grade level. So starting from young children through high school as to how each one of these standards would develop across the curriculum. And these are the 5 each for justice and action. This one was one of my favorites. It was kind of a one-off at the end, but I really liked it because it gave me a little thing I could keep in my pocket. which was when you hear hate speech or when you hear something, we have the option to interrupt, question, educate, or echo. And it's a nice little handy pocket tool. And one of the things I like the most about it is it encouraged students not only to speak up, but to think about it ahead of time, of what you might say if you were in that situation. Walking around the museum, there are quotes from many of the leaders who have worked towards social justice and civil rights since the time of World War II. This struck me as particularly powerful, that it is important that we directly and strategically teach our students how to treat one another, and which also, of course, how to resolve conflict respectfully. This is how many people were willing to give up 2 days of their vacation to have a canceled flight, a shuttle ride, and a bus ride so that they could participate in this incredible event. And for those of you that participated that are here tonight, can you stand up? Can we please give them a hand? It really was an amazing experience, and one that I'm still processing and thinking about how we can incorporate some of this curriculum into our schools. So thank you so much for letting me close the loop on this amazing experience. Does anybody have any questions?
And President Black, what I'd like to is we asked some of our staff to come, and so we do have a little bit of time. I actually would like to hear if you would like to share, no pressure, your experience, because I think sometimes hearing directly from you, board gets a sense of what you learned and maybe what you're taking back.
Okay. I promised them they could. Thank you.
I wasn't supposed to be standing right here.
Yeah.
I learned a lot. I'm not a teacher, I'm a paraeducator. And it was fascinating to see all these folks soaking up everything that this place had to offer in that little bit amount of time and seeing their brains working as to how we can bring it into our community and make a difference. It was very touching. Thank you for, helping make it happen. I think every human on the planet should go to this place. And I really appreciate being a part of it. Yeah, thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thanks. Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Any questions or comments? Mm-hmm. Charlie.
So I appreciate that you're still processing and you're thinking about how to bring some of what you've learned back into the classroom. So I don't want to put anybody on the spot and ask if you've got some ideas already about what you want to bring back to the classroom, but I would love to hear about it when you're ready to tell us. So maybe there could be another time when you come back. And I really am picking up on the excitement and the energy that was generated by this trip, and I'm sure that there'll be something that comes back into the classroom. So I think that's what I would really like to hear at some point.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I look forward to sharing that with you as we develop.
Mm-hmm. Kim?
It sounds phenomenal, and I'm really excited about the fact that this was 40 of our elementary teachers, because I think that bringing these practices to our students at the very early age is going to be most effective and is going to change, the atmosphere throughout their schooling. So I'm really glad that these elementary teachers were willing to give up this time and go.
And I would also, absolutely, and I would also like to also include that it was not just our teachers, but also some of our instructional assistants and some of the people front lines who work in the front office, so that we could all have a common language. Because I think that's what's going to be required, is for all of our participants to have a common lexicon, a common language that we are using around dealing with the issues of the issues that we're facing today.
Good point. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Anyone in the audience? Well, thank you very much for your report.
Thank you.
Okay, the second staff report is the special education update.
Thank you. Marie is out of state, and so I'm going to be giving the this week's special education report, and Julie's going to help me with. There we go. Thank you. So since the last time that Daimee presented, I've had the opportunity to meet with several groups. I've met with special ed teachers from all of our sites, including our preschool, as well as meeting with specialists, including school psychologists, our occupational therapists, assistive technology, program specialists, and behaviorists. I have one more group I need to meet with, and that's our speech language pathologists. I needed to postpone that as I was in another meeting. I'm also starting to schedule some meetings just with school staff who are, I've sent an email out to the principals, and they'll be scheduling those meetings. Some of those meetings are going to go into April because staff meetings get planned pretty much ahead of time. I do want to bring some information to you that Marie gave to me. By no means is this all of the information. There's more that we're going to have to give you. But I do want to show you, thank you. This is from August through January, the total days of absence by school site. And this is absences for paraprofessionals. So, and it's done by school sites. You can kind of see you know, where it's happening. So obviously, I mean, ACC may have less paras, so you're going to see some smaller numbers there. But you can take a look at, in terms of in the months where you might see some trends. And you also might see some trends at the schools. Again, also, Albany Middle School has more student population, as well as the high school. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So this is actually the attendance percentage rates. This is not percent absence. This is actual percentage of attendance by school site from August to January. So again, some months you will see much higher percentages. You do see more in the beginning of the year. You tend to see a little bit higher right around when you start to maybe more higher towards the, you know, more towards the holidays. We do see right before and right after holiday weekends or during like midwinter break or winter break, our attendance rates tend to drop a bit. Since our last board meeting, we've hired 4 substitute paraprofessionals. One is actually in the process that's been added to the sub list. We're just going through the last pieces of the HR paperwork. And this is coming out of a couple of recruitments that I did at Berkeley City College last month. So we're getting some strengthening there. By no means does this solve our problem in terms of having enough coverage for our paraprofessionals. What I do not have tonight, but we can get hopefully by the next board meeting when Marie returns, is to look at what the para-sub coverage rate is. And that's going to take us going back and looking at logs. So I want to at least present this information to you. We can bring more information. Once I complete this meeting that I have with the speech language pathologists, I'm going to look at all of my notes and to start looking at some commonalities. I'll be sitting down with Marie and her staff to take a look at what are some of the areas that we need to address. I also had a chance to speak with Cheryl Thies, who is a parent and a grandparent in our district, but she also works for the Disabilities Rights Education, it's called DREDF. And I've had 2 meetings with her to discuss some of the commonalities that I'm seeing. And she's actually willing to come back and meet with me more as I have more questions. Okay, thank you.
Questions? Yep.
Just to clarify the data that's in the table. This would indicate that the position, that the spot was covered either by the paraprofessional that was supposed to be there or by a substitute. So is that correct? So just like in the first column in August Cornell where it says 96%, the 96 comprises both the regular para or the substitute, and there were 4% that was not able to be covered by either a regular or a substitute.
I think these numbers are the actual paraprofessionals and not necessarily the sub-coverage, but I can verify that.
Yeah, let's try to see whether it's 4% uncovered, for example.
Yeah, the rate of lack of coverage is what we're most interested in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can get that information.
Other questions? Audience?
Mr. Ritchie, Albany Middle School, teacher, special education. Thank you for that update, Superintendent Williams. Definitely looks like we're getting it together as far as some of these checklist items, so I appreciate the time on that. It does take some time, but once we get it going, I think it'll flow a little bit more. I think also that would be helpful for this is actually breaking it out by special day class and resource. Because what we're finding, and again, I'm only speaking about the middle school primarily because that's where I work. I do talk to my colleagues at the high school, not so much at elementary because we're not so close. But what's typically happening, and it happened this week, as it usually does, is that special day class paras are out. And so because it's special day class students who are deemed more critical in many ways, they turn to the resource side of the house, resource specialists, paras, and those people showing up for work are then pulled from their positions to go support special day class. So I think to add a little more validity to this, break it out SDC, RS, and then we can look at how many times we're asking resource paras to be able to pull over, because what that translates to is a percentage of resource students not getting support in the general education classroom. And I appreciate that you're going to be meeting with general ed staff into April, so very good. Another thing I'd like to talk about very briefly is, and we've had some sidebar conversations, and by no means do I speak for everyone. I'm one person, and I look at this. I do talk to my colleagues. You've seen us up here, general education teachers, other teachers, high school. So some of us have these views that we're looking at. I think Albany's in a situation that we're not prepared for. And I don't think it's something that people have done intentionally. I just think it's at our doorstep now. And if you look at other districts, bigger districts, they have many, shall we say, multiple levels of resource, or I should say special day classes for students, and they hire teachers that are skilled in those things, and sometimes they put a package together, like a special day class teacher along with a school psychologist or a mental health person in that classroom for students that fit into that category of having those challenges. And as Mr. Garb said, our students' services needs have increased quite a lot, actually. And so we're seeing students with many, many needs, and I don't think we as a district are prepared for that. What we're trying to do is put one size fits all. And we have an SDC class, and what we're seeing is some of those SDC students are being pushed into resource now. And then they're not really being handled by what I would consider a specialist package that I see in other districts. So you might want to talk to your other superintendents in West County and San Francisco. They have 4 different, resource or special day classes that are specifically targeted to students' needs and putting a package together to support them. Because right now, I think we're all trying to do our best but we're not prepared. We are trying, but we're not prepared for some of these students that have really significant needs, and it's at our doorstep now. And I think we need to start building and looking around in other districts. What are they doing with this now? Because we do have parents flocking here because we do provide a level of service that Albany's known for, okay? So thank you. And thank you for turning that off.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. Any comments or questions? Anyone else?
I am a parent of a child in the 7th grade special ed classes with the resource specialist that just spoke. I wanted to address the board and express my concerns for the lack of resources to the students that so desperately need it, and I wanted to know what steps you are taking to address this issue.
So I guess I'd ask a clarifying question. Are you speaking about a specific resources provided by teachers, or are we talking about? Are you asking about a paraprofessional or psychological services? Can you help me a little bit more with that?
The whole program in general, because I think one affects the other. So if you're talking about the paraprofessionals, as Mr. Ritchie was saying, if they're taking resource student or teachers, those students are missing out. So in general, the entire program.
Okay, so in response to the paraprofessionals, one of the struggles that we have as many districts is being able to find and hire and retain paraprofessionals. And I think what's given us just a little bit of an advantage is the connection that we now, and the partnership that we have with Berkeley City College that's providing a little bit of a pipeline for us. I don't think that by any means that solves the issue. We are, I'm hopefully going to be bringing to the board in the next couple of board meetings a memorandum of understanding between Berkeley City College and Albany for it's what's called a teacher preparation pipeline that actually will allow high school students to get dually enrolled. They can get Berkeley City College credit while they're still in high school, and that helps for them to work. If they're interested in becoming a teacher, they can actually get their paraprofessional certificate and then move on to get their associate's degree. So I'm hoping to bring that to Albany to attract our students who may be willing to or be interested in being in the teaching profession, but that we would be able to keep them here. So, I think trying to find paras that will come and stay is multifaceted, so that's one piece of it. I think on a much more global area, and this is why I'm doing the advocacy in Sacramento tomorrow, is that we are not fully funded by the state or the federal government to meet the needs and the mandates that they put down upon our district and in many districts. And so for me, one of the ways that I feel like I can fight the good fight is to actually go to Sacramento. And whether my one voice is enough, Mr. Tain comes with me to meeting. I really want to advocate. I was at the Special Education Community Advisory Committee with our SELPA director, and that's all the different districts come together, and I'm attending those meetings now to really advocate for parents who have students with special needs. Please get together and write a joint letter and start sending it to your legislators, because I truly believe in the core of my being that if parents write letters to the legislators, to your politicians, they're going to listen to you because you're parents with students who have these needs, okay? I can advocate in Sacramento, Mr. Tain can advocate in Sacramento, but we've got to have parents behind us to say, you've got to start taking the needs of our kids first and having the state and the federal government put the money for special education so that I can hire more people. We can have more quality educators. That's really what's going to be this key. If our government would fully fund special education, I think that's half the battle in terms of funding to provide the quality services.
And in regards to getting parent support, have you considered notifying the parents that there is a significant lack of funding? Because up until today, when there was an incident with my daughter, I wasn't aware.
Yes, and the reason I haven't brought it forward yet is that the spot bills have not been introduced yet, which is why I'm going to Sacramento tomorrow, because I believe that that's when they're going to introduce those spot bills. And I think there are 3 of them, and as soon as I get them, I will be coming back and advocating, and I will be the first person to champion and call parents together. So there's 2 avenues. One was what Mr. Tain talked about, which is called the Murasuchi bill, and that is to raise the base funding for the local control funding formula. What we're asking for is, in addition to that, that the governor releases funding for special education.
And would that be something that you would do? You would make personal calls? Is this something that would go through the school district? Is this something that parents can volunteer to help with? Because I would like to do what I can to help get the word out.
I think I will know more tomorrow. I actually, there's going to be presentations being made to this joint committee, and then I will be speaking, but I get 1 minute. They gave me 60 seconds to speak, so I'm going to make those 60 seconds count. But I will bring back information, and I will be putting out a message to the community.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, because if you can help me, that would be great.
Thank you.
Thank you for the offer, and you can get your contact information to the superintendent.
Email me.
She'll get back to you.
You can email me.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Just very briefly, one thing that a lot of people don't understand about the way that California funds schools is that each district gets additional funding if they have foster youth, or if they have a high concentration of English language learners, or if they have a high concentration of poverty. But there is no special allocation for special ed. And it's not, kids that need these services are not distributed evenly across the state. There are districts that have far greater need for special ed than others. And I do think that this is a real possibility this year, that maybe we could push for change in that area and try to get some concentration funding for special ed, because more money would help. And what doesn't come from the feds, and they don't pay very much at all, then of course comes out of general fund, because everybody, these needs must be met. These are mandated costs. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? Okay, thank you for that update. There will be another update next meeting.
Yes.
We have an update on the Local Control Accountability Plan, also known as the LCAP.
Thank you, President Black. I'm going to turn this over to Marie Williams, who is our Director of Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment. Ms. Williams.
Thank you. Good evening, Superintendent Williams, Board President Black, board members, and community. We are in our 5th year of developing a local control and accountability plan. And as we get ready to embark on the process here in AUSD, I wanted to take just a few moments to provide something maybe of a reorientation for some, but maybe an orientation for others who maybe are new to our schools or new to our community and don't know about the LCAP process. So the purpose of this report is to give kind of just a general overview of the process. I do have some additional updates scheduled throughout the spring to continue to bring information back to you, and so this is the first of those. So we are entering our 5th cycle of the LCAP process, and as a reminder, and this speaks to sort of what Kim and, Board Member Trutain and Superintendent Williams are talking about, that funds that come into school districts since about 2013 have come with sort of way less strings attached, right? So we used to have lots of categorical funds of dollars that could only be spent on certain things. So I remember in my own experience as a high school principal having 26 students who were identified as English learners, but over $100,000 in categorical funds to spend on those 26 children. And so the local control funding formula provided greater flexibility for school districts to be able to allocate funds based on their local needs. But the greater flexibility comes obviously with a need for accountability. And so we have the LCAP, or the Local Control Accountability Plan. So the purpose of the plan is to articulate, to describe goals that we have identified for our students, and then to go one step further than just identifying what the goals are, but then also to talk to the specific actions that the schools and districts will take to achieve those goals. Districts can begin their cycle at any time in the year, but have until July the 1st, on or before July the 1st, to have that plan approved. This year, we are working in a plan, essentially, that was developed last year. So in sort of the first years of the LCAP, districts were writing these 3-year rolling plans, and so a few months into the school year, it was time to write the new LCAP. And that obviously didn't provide enough time for districts often to be able to implement the actions and then to assess the extent to which those actions were really effective. So the Ed Code now speaks to the LCAP being effective for a period of 3 years, which doesn't mean that we don't monitor, it doesn't mean that we don't get input, but that is a change that I think is important to note for folks. The state has identified 8 priority areas that all districts must address when developing their LCAP goals, actions, and services. And if you look at these state priorities, 1 through 8 apply to us, 9 and 10 do not. But you see that there's not only metrics and priorities that have to do with academic outcomes, but also priorities that address parent involvement, pupil engagement, basic services, which is having to do with numbers, percentages of credentialed teachers and sufficient instructional materials. And so kind of in general, California is making this move away from just kind of looking at test scores only to measure how schools are doing, but thinking about all of these other ways that we can measure a school or district success. So somewhere in every LCAP, you will find evidence of these priorities that are further broken down into 27 metrics that have to be addressed. So the plan is to be updated on or before July 1st. Of every school year. And our charge this year in dealing with this plan is to review any changes in terms of how applicable the goals that were previously set still are, and then to review the progress that we have made toward our goals, to assess the impact, and then also to identify any changes to the actions as a result of that review and assessment. And that's why the stakeholder input and parent engagement, community involvement is really important still in this process. So this is just language from the Ed Code that talks about who we consult, and essentially it's everybody. It's everybody. And so I just wanted to note that for you there. There is an opportunity for everybody in the community to be involved in the update process for the LCAP. How do I provide input? There has been in Albany Unified a fairly robust system of stakeholder engagement that involves the formation of an ad hoc advisory committee. That committee goes out and engages stakeholders, gathers feedback, brings the feedback back to the advisory group, analyzes, and does some thinking and advising around kind of what then the next step should be. We've added a piece to that this year in that we are going to be soliciting input electronically. We're going to be sharing the data electronically, which we did last year, but we're also going to be providing an opportunity for folks to give us their input without having to go to a meeting, right? Some of the folks that are on the advisory committee this year have been on the advisory committee in past years and indicated that for some families, because we don't have childcare as an example, attending those meetings was difficult, was a hardship. So we are going to try this year, in addition to the meetings, to also invite folks to provide their input electronically. I did want to share this staff report before we sent that live. I didn't want people to be confused when they got that communication in their inboxes about providing input. So I'm trying to time it so that folks have an opportunity to sort of know what it is when they get it. And the data and the link will be posted on the district website, somewhere on the main page, by Monday. The other conversation we've been having, sort of touching on in the LCAP Advisory Committee, is around the connection of the work that we're doing in our group to the work that the budget group is doing, and trying to think about if there are sort of any connections, any points of connection between those two groups. So one of the things that we are going to be sharing as part of this process is just a very high-level summary of the actions in the LCAP and associated expenditures, very high level, not itemized, definitely summarized, just so that people can get a sense of the programs that we're implementing, the actions that we're implementing, and the costs associated. That's also new this year, so we'll be excited to get some feedback about the extent to which that informs the feedback that we get from people this year. So we are going back to our 10 state and local indicators to gather data around which we're going to ask folks to give input. So we do have to address these indicators that I've been talking about at various points this year in the LCAP, so it seemed like it would make sense to go back to this source of data. And so this is going back to the California dashboard and pulling some of these metrics and giving folks an opportunity to take a look at some kind of 3-year trends worth of data. Often you can't tell much when you're just looking at a year's worth. So to the extent possible, we're giving sort of trends of data and asking folks to reflect on what the data is telling them, what maybe is not told in the data, and what the needs of students are in our district so that we can take that feedback and update our plan accordingly. This is just a slide of our summary California dashboard data. So you'll see blue is the best, red is the worst in the simplest of terms. And so this is just a very high-level summary of the performance of students in our district. But you are able to disaggregate this, and we do disaggregate our student groups and also include students receiving special education services as a disaggregated group. I know Board Member Trutain spoke to the fact that students who receive special education services are not identified as an unduplicated population of students, but the purpose of the LCAP is to really think about how to improve outcomes for all students. And so where we see gaps, we want to make sure to surface those and direct our attention and actions and resources to the extent that we have those to improve outcomes for students. So you will see that the data is identifies students with disabilities as a group that we call out throughout that document. So again, if you check out the district website, I would say by Monday, you will find the data. You will find the feedback form link, and you will also find that very general summary, budget summary. And we are looking forward to this process this year, looking forward to going out and engaging folks and continuing our work to improve outcomes for all of our students in Albany. And so that is my update. Thank you.
Thank you. Question? Charlie.
We have time. So I'm going to put out a big philosophical question, which is, we have a strategic plan, which is our long-term planning document. We have a budget. And then we have an LCAP, which is somehow in between the strategic plan and the budget. And so the philosophical question is, how do we connect all these documents and make them really work together? The LCAP is interesting because it has to operate within the parameters that the state identifies for us. It makes us focus on 3 categories of students, for example. We've expanded our use of the LCAP in a sense by choosing to put into place programs that benefit all students and to show that they benefit these identified categories of students, but they benefit all students. But there's a question in my mind about how useful the LCAP is for bridging between the strategic plan and our budget, just because it has a very well-defined kind of focus on specific categories of students and how the state defines very specific priorities and metrics. It's a philosophical question. I don't know that there's an answer to it. I just want to raise it and say that it's something that deserves a little bit of thought somewhere.
Anyone else?
Charlie, I agree. I think that does deserve thought, but I think it deserves sort of long, slow thought. So I'm going to think about that and get back at another board meeting when we can discuss that more thoroughly.
I agree. All right.
I'd like to, can I make a recommendation? So we have bond counsel here. If the board, please, would you mind if we, after review and action item 1 and 2, move review and action 5 to number 3?
Wait a minute.
Is that all right? Okay.
Yeah.
So that first review and action item is to consider and possibly approve a collective bargaining agreement between Service Employees International Union and Albany Unified School District for 2017-18.
Thank you. And I'm going to turn this over to Cynthia Teo, who's our Director of Human Resources. The board has any questions on this?
Do you have any questions?
Any questions? Any questions or comments from the audience? Do we have a motion?
Yeah, I make a motion that we approve the collective bargaining agreement with SEIU and the district.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Second is a resolution. Oh, Kim.
I don't want the item to go by without saying thank you to all of the members of SEIU for all of the work that they do and how they help keep the district running. I know a number of your members that I see on campus, and I know the work that you do is very, very valuable. Thank you.
I agree, and just want to point out that the City of Oakland had a little bit of trouble with SEIU recently, and Albany, in my time here at least, has always gotten along very well with the union, and I intend to continue to get along well with them. I think they do a great job for us.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. We have a resolution, which is a standard resolution, comes to us every year, to release or non-reelect temporary certificated employees.
And Cynthia Teo is here to answer any questions if the board has any.
Any questions from the board? Charlie?
Well, I think I need to say how much I hate doing this. Every year this comes before us, and I think every year we say we don't like doing it. We do it, and I understand why we need to do it. I would request, I think, that we bring people back as soon as we can. Let's not make them wait until July. Basically, we do this because we have permanent teachers who have rights to fill the assignments. At this point, I think we know that we need to make room in classrooms for the TSAs. So we know that much. And I understand that the district has asked teachers who are on uncompensated leave to notify the district by March 1st if they are returning. And I would encourage you to really make sure that happens, because, you know, if we knew by March 1st that people were coming back or not coming back, some of these notices that have to go out by March 15th would be totally unnecessary. So I just would like to encourage that as much as possible.
Mr. Tier, do you want to maybe provide how fast we usually can make those decisions? We try to do them before the end of the year, I know.
Well, we first have to look at enrollment to see how many classes we're going to need for the next year, right? So that's part of determining how many people will be hired back. Mm-hmm. We also, as you said, have to know which teachers are asking for, which teachers are coming back, and or teachers who may be asking for a leave. Teachers who ask for leave, there's actually no requirement that they notify us by a certain time. Mm-hmm. So it's a little tricky. But of course, we do try and put out our job announcements as soon as possible, as soon as we know that's happening. And that usually is sometime in mid to late March and early April. Mm-hmm. So we've been pretty successful at being able to hire back some of our temporary teachers pretty timely.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other comments or questions on this one? Can we have a motion?
All right. I'll make a motion to adopt Resolution 2017-18-13.
Have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you.
Cynthia, so did you want to make a comment? Sure.
I realize that every year you have to lay off temporary teachers. What we were concerned about this year was that many of the teachers that were hired did not know that they were applying for a temporary position because it was not in the job announcement. And so it's quite surprising for some to learn when they were signing their contract that it was actually a temporary position that they were taking. So I would really like to urge that when these positions are advertised and you know it's for somebody who's on leave, that you do advertise them as temporary positions so that people come in knowing, you know, what this job is about, whether it might not, you know, whether it might only be a one-year position, and it will maybe determine whether they want to perhaps leave a tenured position to come to take a temporary position. And so I would really like to encourage you that, you know, make sure that we do advertise those positions accurately. Thank you.
Thank you. Good point.
I just want us to be careful, not be careful. I want us to make sure the language we're using, so these teachers are not being laid off. When we lay off people, that means we are taking a permanent position and reducing staff or laying off positions for either lack of work or lack of funds. So these are called, this is actually called a temporary release. We're required to put out these release notices to all temporary teachers who have been with the district or will have completed a full year with the district. And yes, I've talked to Patty about making sure that we put temporary on all the job announcements. We used to do that, and that created confusion. So then I stopped doing it, but I will start up again.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to go to Resolution 2017-18-14, authorizing the issuance and sale of general obligation bonds.
Thank you, President Black. I'm going to turn this over to Alan Gard, who's our Chief Business Official. Mr. Gard.
Thank you, Superintendent Williams. So on June 7, 2016, the voters of Albany approved bond measures B and E. Bond measures B and E were a total of $95 million, and that was to address overcrowding in our secondary schools as well as seismic deficiencies at 2 of our elementary schools. Just a little bit about some history. So I'm big on sustainability and reusing slides. So this was at the last board meeting, just talking about the bonding capacity requirement. In 1878, there was a debt capacity level that the state set on school districts, which is 2.5% of the assessed value. At that time, the state did not anticipate all these various things, such as school libraries, gymnasiums, increased statutory requirements for structural safety, accessibility, and energy efficiency.
Indoor bathrooms.
And/or restrooms, because this is what a school looked like back then. I just wanted to use that picture again, so that's it. One of the reasons we needed a waiver for Albany is because our bonding capacity is low. We have bonding capacity of a quarter of the size of Berkeley, and well, that makes some sense because Berkeley is bigger than Albany, but when you look at it as on a per student basis, we're still significantly low. And what that means is when we need to go out and upgrade our facilities, we have less access to capital, whereas Berkeley and some of the other surrounding districts in Alameda and Contra Costa County may not have even heard of the term bonding capacity. The resolution is to issue our second series, and so this is just a reminder of what occurred for our first series. So at our first series, we issued bonds in October of 2016 in the amount of $32.5 million. Prior to issuing the bond measures, we anticipated that we would be issuing debt totaling, the cost of issuing the $32.5 million was projected to be over $58 million. But then we were able to issue at a very good time to where the cost of the debt totaled $52 million, so $6.5 million lower than what we originally projected. It was also great timing because if we just waited 1 month later, interest rates were higher and we would have paid an additional $1.2 million more. And so timing is everything with issuing bonds. So what's kind of the market right now? So at the end of the calendar year, the federal government passed the Federal Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. What that means for municipal bonds, such as bond measures B and E, is that it removes the ability to issue refunding or refunding outstanding bonds at a lower rate. So what that means is over the past few years, we've made 3 bond refundings, and those refundings have saved Albany taxpayers over $4 million. And with the Federal Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, it now removes our ability to issue refunding bonds when market rates are low, which then puts more pressure on school districts to issue bonds at when the interest rates are low, such as now. The other change that occurred since the first issuance is that we now have a new Federal Reserve Chairman who has reinforced the need to increase rates soon. So in the left of the chart is essentially when we issued our first series, and the right of the chart is the interest rates as of last week. And there's been a lot of volatility with the stock market, and so there were questions with the Federal Reserve Chairman that, can we hold off? Can we just wait? Because the Federal Reserve Chairman actually met in Congress today to kind of talk about these various things. And so what he said was, no, market volatility won't stop more rate hikes. And so it just puts further pressure on school districts to issue bonds when interest rates are low to save taxpayers' money. What does that mean regarding our original projection to our overall costs? So in August of 2016, we anticipated that when we issued the full $95 million, it would cost taxpayers $178 million. That's good because the state allows a max of 4 to 1. So if bonds are $100 million, then the overall debt service cannot be more than $400 million. We projected that it would be below 2 to 1, and with our current projection, by issuing $44 million now, we would essentially save almost $10 million for a total of $168.5 million in debt service. What does that mean to the taxpayers? It means absolutely nothing, because the current tax rate is $250 per $100,000 in assessed value for taxpayers, and by issuing these bonds, it won't increase their current tax rate. So the plan that we've developed back in 2016 was to ensure certainty to the community while being responsible in how we issued debt and allow access to the funds to address our facility needs. And so next steps are we would bring forward, if the board approves the resolution tonight, we would bring forward what's called a preliminary official statement next month. The State Board of Education would take action on our bonding capacity waiver application that was submitted, and we would then be able to issue our second series in May or June. And so with that, I could open it up to any questions.
Questions? Of course. Charlie?
Do you want to go first, Kim?
No, go ahead.
Sure. So the logic of this is to get out and get the bonds while the interest rates are reasonably low. I've learned one more thing I hate about the Federal Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. It seems to greatly reduce our flexibility. I presume you could still issue new bonds and repay the old bonds. You just couldn't refund them in quite the way that you did before. Is that right? Yeah. So the logic is to get the bonds out while we can. And I think you kind of based it on projected rates averaging about 4%. Is that right? And you've put in a kind of a cap on the true interest cost of 5%, right?
Correct.
But if we wound up having to pay as much as 5%, then that would cost us more than what we have in these projections.
That would be true.
Any idea how much more?
let's see. So
While you're thinking, I'll just say that where I'm going with this is that it seems worthwhile to me to issue 44 million of bonds, even though we don't need 44 million yet for our projects. We won't need to spend that money for a couple of years if we can lock in a 4% interest rate. But if we can't get a 4% interest rate, then I question the value of putting out 44 million of bonds at this time. So that's where I'm going with this, and I'm wondering if anybody else has any thoughts on that question.
the concern of not issuing until we have a project lined up is that it would then it would provide complications in the timing on when we move forward with an elementary school. So the $44 million is would cover each element, would cover one elementary school, more than one elementary school. If we did not issue the bonds, there would be a lot of uncertainty on whether if we got people together to finalize a plan for temporary housing, if we prioritized either Marin or Ocean View as the next project and then had a design in place that whether we would be able to move forward with issuing the bonds at that time, or if interest rates are higher, or if other circumstances change, it could be another opportunity to essentially not issue bonds, and then it would then create a lot of uncertainty on when those projects would occur.
Did that answer your question?
Not exactly. Well, I guess what I'm fishing for is, I know we've got about 12, we will have about 12 million left over from the Series A bonds that we initially issued in 2016. So we don't need 44 million to proceed with the next project coming out the pipeline. We need something less than that. So you all are getting a chance to see the penny pinching side of me tonight. I don't really want to pay 5% interest on these things. 4% is more than we've paid before. You know, that's probably what we can get in the current climate. And you're making a pretty good argument that we should go for it now so that we can get 4%. But I'm expressing some concern about what if we don't get 4%. I don't really want to issue $44 million of bonds at 5%.
So one of the things with this, so there is continued pressure to increase interest rates, and so if the issuance is over 5% in May, it would be quite a while before it gets back down to 5% when we later. And the other thing, let's see, the resolution is to allow us to issue up to $44 million, but if by May it looks like interest rates have gone up, it would give us the flexibility to issue a lower amount. so that we would be able to table some of it for the remaining project. And so if it was, 35 million or 40 million, something like that, it gives us that flexibility to issue a lower amount.
When we issue the bonds and we have more money than we need immediately, what happens to that money?
So when we issue bonds, it would generate interest in the county treasury. There is a tax requirement where we would need to have a plan on using 85% of the issuance within 3 years in order to ensure that it is tax-exempt bonds. And so if we did not utilize if we did not utilize the full 85%, then there would be let's see what. Yes, there would be a payment that we would need to make for the difference. But it's with this plan, we would be able, so with this approval, we would be able to move forward with selecting an elementary school and move forward with design and implementation, so that that would not be a concern. And it would then be sitting in the county treasury for the next year in order to generate more interest to help just help further enhance projects.
What interest rate do we get from the county treasury?
It's currently low. It has finally increased beyond 1%. And with the federal government planning to increase tax interest rates, it would then increase our own.
I was also going to ask about construction cost escalation. That's been a key driver for many school districts to move forward.
Correct.
A little quicker, and also tax rate management.
Yes.
Timing issues.
So historically, we have seen construction cost escalation of 6%, but over the past few years, because of school districts issuing bonds and the natural disasters that have occurred, we've seen closer to 10 to 15% in construction cost escalation. And so that's another factor in moving forward sooner.
I'm sorry, just for our minutes, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm sorry. My name is Makiko Sato, and I'm with ISM Advisors, and I'm the financial advisor to the district. Thank you. Some of the board members remember me from 2 years ago.
Kim.
So you mentioned, Alan, that this resolution gives us the option of an amount not to exceed the 44 million. So who would, if we did get close to the May, June, and there was a surprising spike in the interest rate, would it come back to the board, or what would be the decision-making process in terms of if we wanted to reduce that amount?
So by the May-June timeline, our plan is that we would have selected either Marine or Ocean View as the next project, and at that point, we would then be able to better determine the exact amount that we feel comfortable in issuing. And so when we select either Marine or Ocean View as the next project, that would be an appropriate time to also make a recommendation on the amount if 44 million is not comfortable.
I mean, I think that we also need to remember that these interest rates are historically very low. You know,
this has been a very unusual period in history, I think. And typically, I don't know, 20 years ago, they were much higher.
Mm-hmm. Other, Charlie?
Well, I do have some other questions. So I guess I'm still fishing around for what happens if we wind up paying 5%. I mean, the projections that you have here show us paying interest of $36.776 million on a $44 million issuance. So I presume if we wound up at 5% instead of 4% interest, that number is going to look more like 44 million interest on 44 million bond issuance. I don't know.
Hi, I'm Catherine Perkins with RBC, the district's bond underwriter.
Thank you.
I have the numbers that I ran to calculate the interest costs that we're projecting today. If I look at the average life that would be outstanding of 18 years times 1% of 44 million, I come to about $8 or $9 million in additional interest costs, were interest rates to go up to an average of 5%.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you so much. That does answer the question. It also wipes out the $9.8 million savings that we were hoping for. I mean, you thought about this a lot, and I think you decided to put in a 5% cap. I presume that's a compromise, just to give us some flexibility.
Mostly for flexibility, but it was also part of, it was consistent with what we did with the first series as well.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, my name is John Palmer. I'm with
Hi, John.
Put the mic up as far as you can get.
There you go.
John Palmer with Warwick, Harrington, and Sutcliffe. It probably also bears mentioning that though nobody can predict interest rates, they're not supposed to go anywhere but up. And so if you end up paying 5% in May, it's not likely that that's going to go down to 3 at any time in the future. And then maybe also worth mentioning that escalation is going to affect your ability to do all the projects that you have, because it'll eat into your project fund, whereas paying a higher interest rate is going to affect your taxpayers. But they presumably knew that you had no control over interest rates when they authorized the bond, and said that they wanted you to accomplish some projects. And so taking the hit either in escalation costs and reducing the number of projects that you have to do, or paying slightly more in interest seems like it has not necessarily comparable effects.
You know, I realize these are all complicated questions and hard to wrestle with. We're pretty much always in this situation. Construction costs always are going to go up. I mean, we would never delay anything based on that.
Kiko, did you want to say something?
I think in some ways, I did want to mention that we did use fairly conservative interest rate assumptions when we built the program.
Mm-hmm.
So, although we've started to kind of count on this low interest rate environment and, counted that as savings, this isn't necessarily changing the plan. It's kind of reverting back to the original plan. And that is assuming that interest rates, rise up to 5%. I mean, this is kind of I think still, hopefully, an unlikely scenario. Right now, we're calculating that borrowing rate, the TIC, to be closer to 4%. So just wanted to mention that.
Anything else?
Just as an anecdote, cleaning out the office, I found the mortgage broker card from my first house purchase in 1992. And on the back of the card was a little rate table, and it started at 7 and went to 13. So we are living in very different times.
Okay, do we have a motion? It's number 5 here. It's Resolution 2017-1814. The motion would be to authorize to approve the resolution.
Sounds like a fine thing to approve Resolution 2017-1814.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much for coming out tonight.
Thanks.
Okay, that brings us back to our lease agreement with Bancroft Center for 819 Bancroft Way, Berkeley.
Thank you, President Black. I'm going to turn this over to Alan Gard on this lease agreement. Mr. Gard.
Thank you, Superintendent Williams. So this is essentially a proposal to split up the district office. Just a little bit of a background. Let me bring it up. So a little bit of a background. The district office actually came together in 2010. It was originally broken up between various departments in different locations. And in 2010, this property in the UC Village became available because the City of Albany completed their modernization work, and so there were portables available. UC Berkeley was gracious enough to provide a lease agreement for the school district to move in, and it was for a 5-year term. That 5-year term had the expectation that we would be gone well before the 5 years, but what occurred was the Great Recession occurred. A lot of things became much more of a priority, and so we essentially needed to go back to UC Berkeley 4 other times in order to get extensions. UC Berkeley understandably said, well, we actually need to really terminate the agreement, and they gave us a final extension of July 31st of this year. And so this proposal is essentially to go back to our previous model of different departments broken up for the district office. We would ensure that some of our direct services, such as enrollment, special education, technology, student services, that those would remain in Albany, in district-owned property. But because after 3 years of looking, we have not been able to find lease space that is affordable, that could house the district office, we then needed to expand our search beyond Albany. And so we are bringing forward this agreement with Bancroft Center for a property on 819 Bancroft Way. This holds a portion of the district office, and we would allocate services such as payroll, human resources, accounting to this offsite center that typically does not have a lot of visitors, basically. One of the things I should mention is that even though we typically have a lot of meetings at the district office for community events or committees, we would those typically occur in the after school or in the evenings, and so we would use school sites for that, so that community would not need to travel beyond Albany. This is for a 5-year lease, and it is something that I've toured with our maintenance and operations staff in order to ensure that the property is acceptable. They've done some upgrades to the property so that it's move-in ready, and this is essentially something that is very cost-effective for a property of this size, or of this quality. Thank you. And that's it.
Yeah, you mentioned in order to mitigate the cost, school district has developed ways to generate consistent and ongoing revenues. Can you describe what those are?
Oh, yes. So this agreement is a 5-year agreement, and over the 5-year period, it would be an additional $20,000 total, so roughly $4,000 a year. The reason we were able to mitigate most of the cost is through coordinating with the City of Albany on facility use revenues coming in for different programs, restructuring how we've operated our gyms and multi-purpose rooms to allow more facility use of those spaces, and things like that in order to help offset the costs.
Other questions from the board? Charlie?
Yeah, could you kind of roll back so we can see the top of this again? Just a little more. There you go. So I really liked the way you presented this proposal, much better than the way I see it written here. I mean, what we have written here is to lease agreement with Bancroft Center for temporary district office. And what you described is really much more accurate. You're splitting up the district office. And I think we need to be clear in our communications with the community that that's what is happening here. I know that when I have said something like relocating the district office, the first thing that comes to mind for people is, you mean I have to go all the way down to next door to Vic's to enroll my kids? So we need to be clear with the community that we are doing exactly what you described. We're not doing what's written here. So I really appreciate the presentation.
Russell?
And I think it's a fine time to revisit processes. You know, if we've got to drag yourself down to an office versus if you could do it online, if you could do it at a school site, if it makes sense to couple it with some other process. And another thought that really we should be keeping in mind for all future construction is if we're going to have meetings at a school site versus at a district office, et cetera, let's anticipate that our future school sites or any future areas we build could be used for a variety of things. It'd be great if at the AHS annex you could open it up separately from the main building. You can, because they're going to be physically separated. But the ability to open several rooms, use them for a community function, not incur the cost of opening up a large building and putting it at risk is a great feature. So where we build things, let's think about modular, let's think about alternative uses, things like that.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. Kim?
Can you describe the services that will remain in Albany?
Yes. So services like enrollment, student registration, most of our special education staff that have to travel between sites multiple times throughout the day. A lot of our technology staff that have to do the same thing of traveling to different school sites, addressing issues.
Student services would also be located in Albany because it's direct services to students, and we want parents to have access to our student services director.
Mm-hmm.
And can you, currently at the Monroe Street office, there are a number of meetings that involve parents and community members. What are your plans for that?
So we would house those at in the school sites. They typically occur after school is over, and so we would reserve spaces for that.
Thank you.
We also have our district leadership team meetings that we hold on Thursday mornings, and we're hopefully going to be able to work out with the high school to see if we can find some space, because I don't want site administrators to have to travel so far to the Berkeley site.
Mm-hmm. Charlie?
Well, I just thought I would note that according to a story I'm looking at in Berkeley side, Albany is to become Berkeley's 9th council district. Now, there's the map right there, so it's appropriate that we've moved the services to South Berkeley. This story appeared April 1st, 2016.
I see. Yes. Others? Yes, Kim.
Lastly, I just want to second what Ross said. You know, we're developing plans for rebuilding our schools, and even though I'm in favor of splitting up the district office now, and this seems like a reasonable solution for that, long term, we need to have all of our offices, all of our people housed in Albany in our own facilities, and so we need to consider that as we're building these plans.
Yes, thanks. Anyone else? Anyone in the audience? Then we need to have a motion to approve the lease agreement with the Bancroft Center.
So moved.
Have a second.
I'll second it.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Now we have an agreement for design build services with Alton Construction for the Albany High School addition.
Thank you, President Black. I'm going to turn this back over to Alan Gard, who will talk about the Albany High School additional project.
Thank you, Superintendent Williams. So I'm excited to bring this item forward. This is an agreement with Alton Construction for the Albany High School addition project. This is in order to come to this proposal, we have utilized the same process that we did for the Albany Middle School Annex, which is called a design build process. We felt it was very effective in managing needs and priorities of the school site and the community, while also ensuring a very cost-effective approach to our facilities. And so what this design build process what this design build process was in 2016 we started this visioning process, which I will talk about. The visioning process prioritized or had these principles in mind, such as sustainability and health, curriculum, having a dedicated makerspace, community and after-school usage, and have it be student-centric. We also recognize that student learning continues to evolve and change, and so we wanted to ensure that our facilities were flexible, and we wanted to be mindful of the architectural aesthetics because of the way the campus is laid out. You could essentially tell when each building was built, and we wanted to use this project to try to tie things together. And so the visioning process with Gould Evans had this site in mind, where we would entice students to come to the building. We would have a very welcoming and approachable way to enter. It would be very engaging, and also something that they would want to stay around in. There were a lot of physical constraints with the property. This is essentially one of the last open areas for the campus, and so this square box is essentially the boundary that we outlined for the classroom. The reason for that is because over here is an overhang for the gymnasium, which impacted where the new building could be. And there's also a lot of utilities that are run across that area that also put constraints. And so here is a visual of the original plan that was developed in 2016. It was very accommodating. It still incorporated that amphitheater feel that we currently have, and it provided additional classrooms and makerspace for the campus. And drum roll, please. So this is the new proposal, which is essentially splitting it up into 2 buildings, and I can talk about that soon, but I also wanted to provide a silent video.
We don't get music with it?
It's 3 hours long, and
Go for it.
one second. And it is in black and white. So there we go. Okay. So over here are new gymnasium doors, and I'll talk about why that's there in a future slide. We are providing some more enticing space on the alleyway so that it doesn't become an alleyway. We purchased some birds to fly around. This is the what's called Gen 7 buildings. These are 4 classrooms that are located next to the Albany High School Aquatic Center, and so these would tie in right next to it. The gymnasium is essentially a 3-story building. This would be a 2-story set of 6 classrooms, and this would be the design makerspace building. It allows areas for students to sit, study, congregate, talk. There's open space here for classrooms to break out and do small groups. Up across this ladder is where the HVAC systems would be, so that maintenance staff can make repairs without impacting classrooms. There are 2 large roll-up doors that roll up. There's the 2nd floor open area as well for more breakout space. Here's an elevator over here. Here's a large roll-up door for the design makerspace, so they can have flexibility to build large projects. And we would essentially remove that temporary rail for the Gen 7s so that it becomes one flat easeway. We tried to get this removed, but that was not part of this project.
District office. All we need.
So the reason for the proposal and for the design and why it looks different than 2016 is because the architect and contractor took this 360 approach. The alignment of the 2 buildings is more suitable for sunlight. It naturally makes it more comfortable for all the classrooms that are housed there. We had 5 high school staff, 3 community members that are a part of the Sustainability and Integrated Design Committee, and they were part of the process that interviewed 3 contractors. And so through those meetings, this is what the architect heard, was that we wanted to provide 8 classrooms, have them be flexible, provide more staff restrooms, gender-inclusive student restrooms, staff workroom. We also wanted to ensure that because the amphitheater is utilized for large assemblies and post-graduation. We wanted to find out more about what that would look like, and these other items that are listed. And so with this proposal, that overhang on the gymnasium is removed, and the addition of additional doors for the gym, and that is to provide more access and flow for post-graduation, where they wouldn't just have to exit from one area. Here's a different view from the key route entering this entering the campus. This is where the gender inclusive restrooms would be, and those are the Gen 7 classrooms. This is where the elevator is, and this is where the staff workroom would be. So this would be under the second story breakout area, and those two doors would roll up, so there would be a lot of open space for students to flow through for various events. And so this is what graduation could potentially look like in towards the alleyway, where it kind of breaks up the congregation from just one area to multiple areas. And that's where the doors are again. And so here are some next steps. So with approval tonight, we would be able to move forward with finalizing design. We have meetings scheduled throughout the month of March, and we then would want to submit final plans to the Division of State Architects soon. This summer, we are beginning to remove the amphitheater so that we can begin construction, which is targeted for September, and target substantial completion by the end of July 2019.
Thank you. Questions? Ross?
So as far as solar, are we going to have something in this current budget that's solar ready or solar deployed?
So we, similar to the middle school annex, that would be a separate review. We want to ensure that we have solar in all of our projects, and so at a minimum, they would be solar ready, and we would then identify how much solar could be placed on this building, what the costs are, go through a bid process, and if we're able to incorporate it during construction, then that would be great. But if it requires more time, then that would be something that we can do afterwards.
So I just wanted to add a few comments, maybe just carry some of the conversation from the design committee into this larger setting, if I could. Well, maybe you could roll back one slide, actually. Just picking up on the question about solar ready or solar deployed, it will be zero net energy ready, and it will be built according to the guidelines of the Collaborative for High Performance Schools, or CHIPS, and it is, I mean, the architects do understand that it will be CHIPS verified, not just
CHIPS designed.
Not just CHIPS designed, but CHIPS verified. So those features will happen. This one, if we're looking at the overview here, I think it would be helpful just to note that the general conversation from the design committee, I think tended to appreciate this design for what looked like would be the quality of the classrooms. That is, that these classrooms would be light and open, airy classrooms, and good classrooms to be in. So I wanted to add that was the sense I think I heard from the design committee, a general appreciation. One example, I guess, would be, you can see with the two buildings, you've got windows on both sides of these classrooms. One interesting feature here is this idea that you can open up where the double arrows are and where we saw the roll-up doors, and create a kind of a combined space with the space flowing from the classrooms to the space in between the classrooms, and that could actually represent a fair amount of space. That said, I think there was also a general concern that was expressed about losing the courtyard. You know, and I think we have to acknowledge that concern was expressed. And I think you've got that built into the plan here to spend about a month and kind of go back with the construction group and see what we can do about that. You know, I think looking at the plans, what I see and what I heard people express was that this kind of thing that looks like the prow of the ship, the angle there on the rightmost of these two buildings, cuts into what could be a little bit more open space. And I think I heard expressed the idea that could that be kind of altered in some way, pushed back a little bit to create a little bit more open space. So that could be something that could be discussed with the architects during this month. If you look at that space, there actually seems to be two staff workrooms to me, because that space right there in that angle next to the stairs is labeled as a staff workroom. Mm-hmm. That looks like it will be a very dark and airless space that could be jettisoned. You've got that nice space up on the second floor with big windows and light, and I don't know why you need, so that...
Well, there's a workroom and a dungeon. You need the dungeon.
The dungeon, that is what that space will be, yeah. That space will be the dungeon. So anyway, I think there's a little bit more that could be done in terms of fine-tuning this, and I hope that during the month of March that could be done. So those were thoughts that the committee expressed that were kind of, I would say they weren't just the opinions of individual people. It wasn't like a formal vote or anything, but just kind of themes that came out of those committee discussions.
I would love to hear impressions from our student board representatives.
I think it's, excuse me, I think it's interesting how, like, when you look at it, it's really, instead of having one big building, it's sectioned off into sections, which I think allows, I guess, like a sort of flow of traffic, so we're going to avoid those kind of congestions. One, I guess, like, thing I would like to change, that if just like, I guess, like, just an idea. So when we went to the front where the current portables are now, in the front of the second building, you keep going back? Yeah, right there. Where it's a staircase and a ramp, I think it would be a lot better to maybe include a ramp up there, because I know when I was in the CAD program last year, we dealt with a lot of, not super large things where you had to roll them through rolling doors, but relatively large things, and having a ramp would provide an ability to use two separate entrances for larger than usual things in terms of getting.
You mean instead of the stairs, have that be a
just have a giant ramp. Mm-hmm.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
Like the whole thing be.
Right, because it still gets, students are still able to walk up and down, but you're also able to utilize things like hand trucks and, other rolling devices to move things in and out.
Mm-hmm. Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, the fewer stairs.
Hima, how's it look to you?
Well, I really like the innovativeness of the design. I think the space is used well, but I think the only thing that I'm sort of concerned about is, again, the space. Like, I just don't know if I can imagine all of graduation being on that little, it's not supposed to be an alley, but like right now that's where the dumpsters are, and that's where PE runs their miles. So like imagining that is just sort of, that's one thing. But I think the greenery is good. I've always been in support of more foliage on campus, and I think that's a nice touch. I mean, I think this is a great use of space, and if there's any other modifications or anything else that comes along, I'd be happy to see it. But I'm just the other concern is the stairs. I just think that, like at AMS, you have the stairs, and I think that that's sort of, I mean, it's like 2, and that's fine. But I'm worried that this is just a bunch of stairs, and I mean, we have stairs inside, we have lots of stairs, but I think maybe they're a little narrow. I think traffic would be an issue. That's one of my concerns.
Thanks.
Just to roll off of Mahima, because I was just like thinking about this. I noticed that the benches and stuff are gone, so maybe a good way to monopolize on, our elevated areas in terms of the second floor would be put like little benches and stuff so students could, rest up above and below, and so it'd have, diversify the environment you could eat lunch in while also, making the best use of our spaces and greenery.
Good. Thanks. Kim, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I think that, not all of the benches and outdoor furniture is pictured here. I think that more that would be elaborated on as the process goes forward. But mostly I wanted to say I see a representative from Alton here, and I hope that he would feel comfortable commenting about the whole process that that you participated in. Yeah.
So, hi everyone, my name's Eric Andresen, and I'm with Alton Construction. I'm really happy to actually talk about the experience because design build is an important, really important process, and I think it changes a lot of people's attitudes towards public bidding, where a lot of times you get the lowest bid and sometimes you don't get the best job. This has been, and I can say without a doubt, the best experience we've ever had with a design build process, whether we've been awarded the project or whether or not we just participated and weren't chosen. The effort and thought beforehand, before we even came in to the picture, I think was extraordinary. The effort put forth by the construction manager at this time that the district hired to come to each individual company to explain the situation, and I think to give us a really good idea and represent the needs of the school was above and beyond what we could have expected. Committees were great. It's always nice to get to hear everybody's opinions. I mean, even sitting here right now and listening to the students talk about access and things like that, you know what I mean, is important. And I think that's one important thing to really nail down on is that, while time is a crunch, we do have these next 5 weeks, and I think 5 meetings we have scheduled where we can take this and we can elaborate, because ultimately, this is just as much fun for us, I think it is for you guys to get to participate in these things. And we really appreciate the opportunity to do this and look forward to working with you on the project.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thanks. Ross?
Yeah, I recall in the previous design, the space between the gym and the building in that part of the L included like a bike cage and all that. I'm not seeing anything here. What are we envisioning for high school and bikes?
That would be a good point for the next phase of the process, is identifying where it would be, because it definitely is still a need and something that we want to encourage more students and staff to utilize.
Yeah.
Charlie?
Yeah, I think maybe I can answer that, and that this design was different in that it really focused on people flowing through the whole property. And so that space between the gym and the two-story building is a flow-through space. Instead of it being, as originally conceived, it was going to kind of back up against the gym and be sort of walled off with a chain link fence and stick a bike cage back there. So the discussion I think that I remember hearing was that we would probably need to look at more bicycle storage around toward the side facing Memorial Park, over perhaps toward the pool itself, and I'm having trouble visualizing where that might be, but that's what I remember the committee talking about.
Jacob?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment real quickly that it looks nice. It just seems awfully packed together. I know there's not much room to work with, you know, and if this is what the people ask for, I'll support it, but it looks really, really
It's packed.
packed, you know. And also, was there any discussion about security? The few times I've been on campus, it is just so wide open. I mean, it is, I know that we have the, you know, the public park there and the tennis courts and all that, but I mean, it was brought up earlier about what happened in Florida. I mean, it's just super wide open, and I know 5 weeks isn't much time. I probably should have said something earlier, you know, but I've been up to the campus a few times, you know. I was up there a couple of weeks ago for a wrestling tournament, and I don't know if there's any, I mean, it doesn't seem to be secured at all.
Yeah, it's a very open campus.
It's open.
Yeah.
It's open.
It's part of a larger discussion with how we want to provide safety for our schools and our campuses. There are definitely, we work with the Albany Police Department to talk about ways to provide security. They would be in favor of adding fences and things like that, but then having discussions with other parts of the community in order to see how that would work would need to occur. With this layout, it provides more visibility than the previous proposal because it does not have one wall that is completely hidden from supervision. And so I think as a broader discussion, we can talk about how each of our schools have provide security.
I just wanted to mention something that hasn't been emphasized yet in this discussion, which is one of the reasons to build these specific spaces and facilities is to increase our ability to have career technical education. So I know we've talked about the makerspace there and the CAD lab with the roll-up doors for big equipment and big projects. Also, there was a classroom that was originally going to be a biomedical laboratory for that type of training. And I think that right now it's not scheduled to be finished that way, but I think that those considerations for a possible future lab are there, so that there will be the possibility of bringing that in. So I think that this gives us the opportunity to offer a lot more to our high school students, and we have that need. We really need to increase our career technical education capabilities.
Thanks. Desiree?
Hi, so I know that the designers here, but as a parent, I would like to see more of the security part that Board Member Clark talked about, especially in the upcoming. I don't know if you guys are still, because apparently you're gonna vote on a pre-design, but then still designing it, and then they vote on it again.
We're not actually approving the design, we're approving the choice of the construction company, essentially.
Okay, so once the design, comes out, then, and he said that they have to meet some more, then is there going to be more of that security feature? Because if it is, in fact, new technology, building in this computer lab, do the doors lock automatically? That's the kind of stuff I want to know, as a parent. And when you guys are getting, these bonds and all this, that's a whole lot of money. And because we're in this deficit that we're trying to fix,
when you do have and send your kid to school, you want to make sure. So even if it was, little cameras, or wherever the place where they're going to be, like in the corners, those are the types of things that I'd like to see. And I say that for the middle school, construction and for this, because parents want to know, and then somebody in the office would be watching at least the cameras to have those blind spots. So I think something like that is really important, just as you guys go forward. So if you don't have physically somebody walking around, the camera positioning, at least, or something about the mechanism with the doors, if there was some kind of lockdown or something, something like that is, as a parent, again, is what I would want, to hear and, see these bullet points, so that way I know, okay, if there's a function, because sometimes you don't have to have a high schooler to have some function there at the school. So if it's at any point in time, then, these are things that you guys can already, have, lined up. So just saying, but that's my suggestion.
That's a good point. So when we bring the contract back with the final design, we can have a slide or two that kind of talks about some of these things. We've upgraded our security cameras 2 or 3 years ago at the Albany High School campus, and we would then, with these new buildings, just add into that. And for these new buildings, for both the middle school annex and these buildings, these would be key card doors, and we would then develop a timeline where we can phase in key cards throughout the district. But that would take time to do.
Val?
I also think that, unfortunately, we are in times where we have to think much more about security, and as we think about even the building of our elementary schools, that security should be something that we consider because our elementary schools are used for many, many venues, and having maybe a camera security system at our elementary schools would be a good idea as well. So I think it's something we should at least be mindful of and keep it in our notes.
Jacob?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that again. The more I think about it, with all the money that we're spending and all the time that we've been planning this, that I don't think it's just enough to say we're going to consider doing it. So I don't know how I can more strongly kind of one up it. Than it's more than advocating. I know I'm just one board member, but I just don't think that it's okay to do this big construction and not put in fencing. I don't see how it would be all that difficult. So I know there's a few more weeks, to still look at it. At my school in San Leandro, where I work at, we put up fencing, and at the beginning there was a little pushback from the parents, but after that they were very happy for it. We're talking about our children here, and the campus is just, it's so wide open. So I can't really express what I'm trying to say, because I know I can't just dictate what we need to do. But I highly recommend that we get more input from other people, because I would be surprised if other people wouldn't want the school to be as secure as possible.
One of the things that I should point out for this process is, after we have a somewhat firm design, or essentially we can do this now with this design, is we then reach out to the city. We work with the fire department and the police department so that they can provide comments on these sorts of things. And so so that will be part of the process, and then we can get more specifics on expanding it with the police department on for the entire high school campus. What are some ideas and recommendations?
So I agree that we definitely need to consider security on the campus. It's a large campus. Defense might be the best solution. Electronic surveillance might be a good solution. I think we do need to consult with the police department and see what their recommendations are and what the cost will be, but I agree that we can't just put that as a second consideration. We need to make sure that that's included in the plan. Ross?
Yeah, I would absolutely also recommend talking to the city regarding Memorial Park. I mean, right now, that whole back baseball section is a chain link, a very high chain link fence. You know, you don't pass through it, there's no flow. You might want it, you may not. We have the area fronting on Portland opposite the aquatic center of the park, which is a natural gathering place. It would be the perfect place to sort of flow a graduation. So working with the city and figuring out if there's a best collaboration as this goes in. I want to recommend to the high school, so if anyone wants to pass it along, putting up a webcam in a window and getting a year's worth of construction snapshots would be a wonderful project and easily done, even easier than putting one on the roof of AMS to get the San Gabriel project, and you know, could capture an interesting future presentation. And I guess I very much like the idea of the campus being as open as is. I'm a bit startled that, yes, you can easily walk into the lobby by the gym and wander to anywhere in the building and say hi to the custodian at worst. But I'd really like to promote the idea that that it is as open as any public space. And I think our primary concern is going to end up really being more issue of vandalism and theft. I'd hate to have, you know, a couple of $100,000 worth of computers walk off. I think, you know, the events of Florida notwithstanding, that's a much more likely concern. And I think that the message of saying, you know, we're a public community space is also an important thing to send.
We are at the end of our scheduled time, though we can extend it if we want to. How's the board feel about that?
We have one more thing to
So
do.
in terms of discussing this.
In terms of this discussion.
Yeah. You know, I think I'm prepared to vote on this one. I would like to endorse the idea of thinking very systematically about school security. You know, I think none of us can walk away feeling good unless we have really put everything that we think we can put into making our schools safe places.
I agree. And we have the school safety plans that are supposed to come to the board every year, and we're about a year and a half late on those right now.
Yeah.
And definitely we need to be thinking about school safety.
Maybe we could have either that discussion around the school safety plans, or if it needs some real serious thought, again, another committee, dare I suggest it, that really thinks systematically about all our campuses.
So I am going to ask for a vote on this, but I first, just a very brief appreciation. The contract that we're being asked to vote for ran about 200 pages in the board packet, and I read as much of it as I could in the time we had. But I just want to appreciate that there was a lot of thought in that about how to do this construction while classes are going on in the other buildings without disturbing the rest of the school. And I do want to appreciate that thought went into this. With that, I'm going to ask for a, let's see, it's an agreement for a vote to approve the agreement for design-build services with Alton Construction.
So moved.
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 James?
Just one last time, I mean, I want to approve this, but the more I think about it, I don't know if I can say with the stipulations that we do security fencing, because to me, it's not just enough to say we're going to consider doing it. I mean, I don't really see, just real quickly thinking, there's the key route entrance, and then there's the two sides on the alleyway, right? I'm sure there's other places where you could get in, but as far as putting fencing up, you're not talking about all that much. So
let's put in the minutes that your approval of this is contingent on
if that's how
security fencing to the project.
Thank you. That's how I'd like to word it. Yes.
Thanks.
So, yes.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to our last item, which is a vote for delegates for the California School Board Association Delegate Assembly.
Thank you, President Black. The purpose of this item is for the board to vote for the California School Boards Association Delegate Assembly election. There are 4 positions that are open, and the board can vote for 4. So with that, I will turn it over to our board president.
Does anybody have any strong feelings about any of these candidates? Kim?
I support Amy Miller. I've worked with Amy on a few issues. I've communicated with her. I've talked to her on the phone, and I believe that she's on the legislative action arm of the CSBA, and I think she does good work. So I'd like to support her.
Thanks.
I don't remember doing this last year. Did we vote as the board, as one vote, or are we voting individually?
We can, I'm not sure what you're asking. Do we vote, one vote for the entire slate, are you saying? Or do we vote?
Do I vote for 4 people, or he votes for 4 people?
No, I
or
think
do
as a
we-
board, we vote for.
The board as a whole votes for.
The board as a whole
a
votes for
slate,
4.
right.
Okay.
We
board
tried
has
to
one
come
vote.
to an agreement on
All right.
which 4, and then we vote on it.
Yeah.
If we can't agree, then.
Then we don't vote.
No,
Yeah.
I will support Leo Sheridan. He's a board member in San Leandro, where I'm a teacher. And he's
Oh, okay,
done a lot
that's,
of good work, so.
okay, that's good to know.
That's good. So we
Yeah.
have Amy Miller, was that
Mhm. Yeah.
yours? And Leo Sheridan. Are there any other 2?
My sentiment was to think that the CSBA is doing fine work, and so I would have sort of given all the incumbents a sort of a pass by default, and was looking for a 4th, and looked at Dr. Walker. Annette Walker seemed to be the strongest candidate of the ones who wasn't previously an incumbent. If we were going to vote for Leo Sheridan, I don't know if we would necessarily add another non-incumbent, or if we'd want to keep all the incumbents. But I was most impressed by hers, looking at her as one of the non-incumbents.
Okay, so we have Annette Walker, Leo Sheridan, Amy Miller. Those are 3. And any other recommendations?
Well, I second Ross's comment about feeling that we have voted for each of the incumbents once already, and I see no reason not to vote for them again. I think they've
There were
all.
several incumbents.
Well, the ones that we have a choice of would be Amy Miller, Desiree Campbell, and Valerie Arkin, I believe.
Okay,
Those are the 3 incumbents that we could vote for.
I'm comfortable with either Valerie Arkin or Desiree Campbell. I read their applications, and they both seemed fine. I don't have a strong preference. Does anyone want to?
I think Valerie Arkin also caught my eye.
Okay, that's.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I liked her application too. So that would give us. See if we get this right. Valerie Arkin, Amy Miller, Leo Sheridan, and Annette Walker. Is that right?
Yeah, I did like. Let me look at this again. Before we had some discussion about representing the East Bay, and we get that with San Leandro, and I guess we get that with Hayward. I think there's a good reason to vote for Desiree Campbell, but we can't vote for 5, so I'm good with. I guess it's Arkin, Miller, Sheridan, and Walker. I'm good with that.
Okay, should we vote on that slate? All in favor of the slate of Valerie Arkin, Amy Miller, Leo Sheridan, and Annette Walker, say aye.
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 All right, that's done. Brings us to agenda items, matters introduced by the board.
There were none that were stated tonight, unless the board would like to add any.
What about that security overview that that we were talking about?
I think we need to have that discussion. I don't know. This is a little bit complicated. Jacob feels strongly that we should have a security fence. I feel we do need to consider security. I don't know if the fence is the best possible answer. I don't know if we have time to add this to a board meeting as an actual board discussion, and time to feed
Well,
into
I'm not talking about the AHS project. I just thought I thought we talked about
an overall
an
Yeah,
overview.
well, that definitely needs to be agendized with school safety plans, which I hope is on the calendar already. But yes, that is an agenda item. We might as well mark it as one, because the school safety plans definitely need to come back to the board. And I think we will need a report back to the board. This is probably already in the plan, but we're going to have design meetings over the next month, and I think we'll need a report back to the board on what the final design looks like, so the board can weigh in on it.
Yes, that would be brought to the board at the, when we bring forward the second phase of the agreement with authorization for construction. And so we would be anticipating May for that item.
Okay, and if the fence is not part of that plan, then the board can certainly have a discussion about it at that time. Okay, anything else? Good, well, thank you all, and we're adjourned.